Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes.
First of all, let me just say this. I'm not condoning the use of psychedelic drugs. That said, though, neither am I condemning the use of psychedelic drugs. I think the appropriate attitude to have towards them is one of open-minded, skeptical inquiry, in the sense that these are very interesting substances that produce very interesting experiences that humankind has already learned a lot from and still has much more to learn. And it's a kind of a learning on a subject that Western science really hasn't done much research on, and that's changing today, and it's largely a result of these substances becoming so popular as they did in the 60s, and they're starting to come back now after they were sort of banned by the government for a while. A lot of research was forced underground, and now it's starting to rise up into the mainstream academic world again. But I compared the discovery of LSD to the invention of the atomic bomb, and I did that because not only did they happen at almost the exact same time, but they both had an astoundingly profound effect on the way human beings perceive themselves and the world. And the effect is almost a mirror of itself. So in other words, the atomic bomb shows us how much power we have over the material world. We can manipulate matter in such a way as to release such an immense amount of energy. And then politically we can scare our opponents into submission just by, not even do we have to use this weapon, just by the sheer fact that we have it and that we could, and that it is so destructive. It scares people into submission. So nations now have so much power. And LSD, on the other hand, gave us a tremendous amount of power over our own minds, over our internal states of consciousness, the ability to reprogram ourselves to view the world in new ways, from new perspectives that we never really would have considered before. So, there's a lot of parallels between nuclear bombs and LSD. One is creative, and one is destructive. But both came onto the scene at the same time. So after Abbie Hoffman invented LSD, it sort of went through some, elite scientific studies that weren't very well known to the public. The CIA was using it for mind control experiments. They did a lot of unethical things. A couple people died as a result. And then in 1962, around the early 60s, a guy named Timothy Leary, I'm sure everybody is familiar with him. That's him right there. He was a psychologist at Harvard, and he got a hold of some psilocybin pills. And he'd heard about psilocybin from Gordon Wasson, I think, who made a trip down to Mexico, visited a shaman, and was really the first Westerner to have this experience of tripping on psychedelic mushrooms, and then to write about it. I think he published an article in Life magazine about it in the 60s, early 60s, or possibly the late 50s. I'm not exactly sure, but so Timothy Leary got interested in these experiences, and when he first started trying psilocybin, it really blew his mind. And his colleague Richard Alpert, who is since known as Ram Dass, he actually changed his name was also involved in these studies, and they started giving psilocybin to all these artists and creative people and thinkers and intellectuals, and unfortunately also to pretty much anybody who wanted to participate in their experiments. You know, Harvard was really started to get concerned about Leary and Alpert's experiments, and eventually they both got, well, Richard Alpert left willingly. Timothy Leary sort of got kicked out after a few years because his experiments were a little bit too wild and unrestrained, and he became more of a political activist than a scientist. And I mean, you know, to a large extent, it was his fault. His way of going about popularizing these experiences was really what forced them to go underground, because the government felt very, very threatened by the message that Leary was conveying. And that's really what led to the whole drug war. And the drug war is a topic for another post. I don't really want to talk about why these things became illegal. I want to talk about these substances themselves, specifically LSD, psilocybin, cannabis to a certain extent can be psychedelic, and ecstasy, mescaline, ayahuasca. It's important to remember that these, I mean, we call them drugs, and they all fit into the same category called drugs, and the government refers to them as hallucinogens. I've tried most of these substances, and I've never hallucinated on any of them. In other words, I've never seen something that I thought was real in the world out there that wasn't there. What all these substances do, generally speaking, is make you more aware of the real world, the world that's actually right in front of you. And you become totally transfixed by the detail and the beauty and the interconnectedness of nature. And it's not a hallucination. It's an opening of the mind, an opening of the doors of perception, as Aldous Huxley put it. Now, when you close your eyes, you're going to see colors and images, and possibly even have these archetypal experiences where you feel and see yourself like as though you're in your mother's womb, say, or floating up a rainbow into the sky, or becoming light, or you can have all of these experiences with your eyes closed. So in that sense you hallucinate, but you hallucinate knowingly. I mean, your eyes are closed. You're not seeing things in the world with your eyes open that wouldn't necessarily be there.
Cellophane flowers of yellow and green towering over your head. Look for the girl with